Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Words with Ward. Today, we interview Stephen Thompson, who's been working in ministry for 16 years. He currently serves as a youth minister and young adult minister at St. Mary's Parish in Sherman, Texas. St. Mary's has been dedicated as a pilgrimage site for the Jubilee year in the Dallas Diocese. St. Mary's is growing substantially, and a lot of it is thanks to Stephen Thompson's work, although he's probably too humble to admit it. Stephen Thompson's also a loving husband and father, and in this episode we talk a little bit about discernment, youth ministry, working out, and so much more. This is the Words with Ward podcast, and I'm your host, Tyler Ward. Hope you enjoy. Stephen, thank you for being on the podcast today and taking time out of your day. I know you got a bunch of little kids running around, so I appreciate it.
Hey man, this is great. We're gonna have a good time.
Absolutely. So I've had the privilege of following you around a little bit and seeing what you do for work and kind of helping and hopefully not getting in the way too much. But you serve as a youth minister currently at St. Mary's Parish. But I think especially in the Catholic spheres right now, it's not many people know exactly what youth ministers do or know that we have youth ministers. So could you just kind of explain your role a bit more and what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, we can kind of just start in maybe why that is in the Catholic sphere of youth ministry. You know, we have the clergy of priests and deacons, and for a long time, particularly in this country, ministry or formation really happened through Catholic schools. And so, you know, through early 1900s, formation happened mainly out of the immigration through Europe into the United States, that you would find a lot of these Catholic immigrants who weren't educated. And so the church had a real responsibility to educate its people. And so from that, the Catholic parochial school system in this country really grew, and that was really sufficient for passing on education in general, and then also Catholic education through a head knowledge. And as we see through probably the Cultural Revolution, which I would say involved a lot of things in the 1960s, it's just wild that the Cultural Revolution, the Sexual Revolution, the Second Vatican Council all happened around the same time. And from that, there was a weird shift in the church where that generation who experienced things from their parents, like my parents took me to, not me, but they would say, my parents took me to Catholic school, and so I'm going to do that for my kid, my child, and that should be enough, just really wasn't enough. And Protestantism and their youth ministry was a thing and was thriving, and they run things very differently. You know, they have small like kids church and big church and these different terminologies. What we do is with liturgy, can't really separate that. And so from there came like something called CYO, Catholic Youth Organization, which really started to gather young people in a youth ministry type experience, but really focused on sport. So it was really good on community building and service activity, but still didn't really penetrate the heart.
Yeah.
And so really, I kind of follow the lineage of the Life Teen model of Catholic youth ministry, and Life Teen is celebrating their 40th year this year. So they've started in 1985. As St. Timothy Parish in Arizona was right across the street from a high school, and they would just see these teenagers pouring into this school and not reaching them. And this pastor had dinner with a kid who was recently confirmed, but didn't want to go to church anymore. And he said, you know, why is that? You know, basically, and the teenager kind of responds that, you know, nobody ever welcomed me in. And so that really spoke to the idea of relationship and the fact that the church has not done a good job of engaging young people to into relationship, caring about what they are interested in, and then meeting them where they are at and introducing the person of Jesus to them in that place. So it kind of started at a singular parish, and then from there, kind of spread. They would begin doing these conferences, and so I encountered Life Teen for the first time in 2003. So that's 22 years ago, and as a sophomore in high school. So I was confirmed in the 8th grade, and I kind of almost had to deal with my mom that after I was confirmed, I don't have to go back. I mean, I go to mass, but I don't have to go back to faith formation classes or CCD as we called them then. And I just hated a classroom whenever I was in school. And then Sunday mornings was classroom model as well as a form of catechesis. And I couldn't get there. And so, well, I was basically kidnapped by my mom as a sophomore, and she kind of took me to this retreat. And I couldn't put words to it, but something was different at this retreat. And I had a powerful experience, but didn't have the words for it. And I went back to my parish, and I told my pastor at the time, I said, I had this experience, and we should do something like this here. And he says, well, we do youth the first Wednesday of the month over in the basement in the house across the street. And that just wasn't it. I just knew that wasn't the same thing that I had experienced. And so I started going to this parish in the neighboring town where they had Life Teen, and really encountered some incredible adult volunteers, the youth minister, the next youth minister, and then not only that, but the peer group who was really evangelizing to me, that they thought it was worth it enough for me to be there, that they would drive from their town to my town to pick me up, to take me back to their town where the church is, to go to youth group, and then take me back home for them to drive. They spent a lot of their parents' gas money to evangelize me, and from that, I just continued to meet the Lord not only in the church and in the sacraments, but in His people, and it called me to more. And I've been on, like I say, I've been on this Jesus train, this Jesus journey for now 22 years since that first retreat, 2003, with Life Teen, and finished out my high school years participating in their Life Teen program. Served as a volunteer corps member for several years after that, serving the teenagers, and then immediately, even my senior year in college, started working for the church. And so as we spoke off camera, like I've just finished my 16th year of full-time ministry. So that's what it's kind of a short summary of the journey of youth ministry kind of has been, and then has been for me too.
That's fantastic. You mentioned so much good stuff there. Primarily, and I've never even thought about this before, is the reason that maybe we haven't had these separate things for all the different ages of groups is the fact that you can't separate the liturgy.
Yeah.
Or you'd be holding masses 24/7 and mass for the kids, mass for family, but that's not necessarily
and that's not what liturgy's for
as well. You're supposed to be there as a family and a community. You mentioned something, it might have been a minor detail in your talk there a little bit, but you were talking about catechesis in the beginning was primarily head knowledge, and that we were lacking relationship. Is this relationship, to be specific, is this regarding relationship with other people in the community or with Christ? Both?
Yeah, both, I would say.
Okay.
And so, and as a professional youth minister now, what we say, the studies show with a person staying in the faith, the number one thing is the role of a father in the faith life of their children. That's like number one indicator that as a child grows into adulthood, that they'll remain close to the church. The second thing is a non-parent adult who has been a witness to the faith actively in this person's life. And so, so with relationship, I think it's modeled. And the old saying, and if it's been old and it sticks around, there's some truth to it, is that they don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so we want to, or the way we approach ministry is we want to engage into this person and to meet them where they're at and encounter them, and then allow that relationship to lead to an encounter of the person Jesus Christ, and that they experience, like I did, experience something that I haven't experienced before. It wasn't like I could rationally conclude of God's existence and Jesus, and you can show me the evidence of Jesus and whatever else, and I could get there. It was that I had experienced something, and then the journey from the heart to the head was shorter from the head to the heart. Like I could experience something, and so now I would desire to know more, and that leads to something deeper.
So still emphasizing that importance of the head knowledge, but you're placing that second in procession of first encountering them as a relationship, and
Yeah,
then
and I think some people would have a Thomistic argument that Thomas would let's say Thomas Aquinas would say that it must start in the head to then penetrate the heart, and then there's a relationship back and forth. But and I would just really wrestle with the way our culture is, and the way that people are so on the based on the emotion
yeah,
and uh, and by experiential things that they do and all throughout culture that um, that the way they're captured or the way they experience things, and then the intrigue comes from there. So there's like a first starting point, and from my experience with personally, and then leading others, there's much more likely that you're going to allow someone to experience walking them through prayer, having the Lord then expose their sin or their particular situations in their life to to like they have been rescued from that, and then surrender their life to the Lord, and then from there a deepening of what is he calling me to? Let me learn more about him through the scriptures. Let me learn more about through the lives of the saints. Uh, what kind of changes is the Lord asking me to do in my life? Does he care where I go to college and stuff like that? And it starts first with an encounter.
that's awesome. And I think that's something that you've personally helped me on too. So for the listeners that don't know, you've helped kind of teach me how to evangelize. You've helped in my own formation as well. I can't thank you enough in that, but you've also helped me help others as well. And I was very much on the opposite end of the spectrum. I needed to know first
Right.
and kind of have that heart. And I thought that's how everyone was. And as you were saying, it's more times than not the other way around. And coming from a counseling background, being in counseling school right now, I have a little bit of lean towards being able to help people emotionally. So God blessed me in that way. But definitely flipping that script when it came to evangelizing and teaching of impacting the heart first, teaching them about a relationship with Jesus, and then you can kind of get into more heavy duty theological catechesis, so to speak.
Yeah, and as you begin knowing the person first, because you engage in a relationship with them, then you can see even as your maybe your clinical work or that you're working on is that what does this person need next, and where I'm always as I'm engaging in relationship with you, okay, that like I see that you're in this point now, this thing is being exposed, let me use this lever or this avenue to tell you what the church would say about this, or and people always ask, well, what do you think? And I say, well, the church would say, it's not necessarily like Stephen saying this to you. The church would say this, and then that uh, would allow more intrigue to take place from there. But I remember encountering you. I guess when you were maybe freshman or sophomore year in college, and just the deep love that you had for the study of the faith, that the rationale and even the love of Fulton Sheen and the arguments there, and just the depth of apologetics that you wanted to go through, because I'm gonna convert souls, and I'm gonna do it by the rationale and the intellect, which is a beautiful thing, and you can do. And but I think again, people don't care what you know until they know that you care, and so if you can engage with people and build trust, and then open the scriptures, it's just kind of what it's kind of what Jesus did too. The road to Emmaus, he opens it up and explains things, and our hearts were on fire, and
Well, I reflect so much on when like they a lot of like the Jewish people at the time kind of looked at Christ for not necessarily always abiding by the Jewish law because he first cared for the sinner first,
hmm
and just encountering with the people and
and that
leading.
might be what our church is missing, honestly, man. Like we've been so rigid with. I mean, we obviously have rules for a reason, but sometimes rules for rules' sake I just don't quite understand it. And I think that we miss the encounter with a person. We think, well, this is the rule. Well, why is the rule? You know, and what can we do about it? And so it's interesting, and it's not just the church, man. It's the society in general. We had a garage sale a few weeks ago, and I went and got a permit for it, which I'm surprised I did. But I went to got a permit for the city, and I said, how many people actually get this permit? She goes, I hope everybody did. I said, oh, okay. Why is that? She goes, because there's a $200 fee if you don't. I go, for for selling stuff in your driveway, like why is it the rule? It's just the rule, and we sometimes just abide by rules because of the rules. And I just get tied up with this sometimes with people who desire sacraments, people who desire baptism. Like, why are we making people jump through hoops sometimes? And like let's see what we need to actually get done, and then let's do it. This person, if I have a 16-year-old who desires a deeper relationship with the Lord, and they've been baptized, but they haven't received Eucharist or confirmation, like, let's go and figure out how we can make this happen and not delay. And sometimes rules get in the way of this, and I think there are rules for the reason at some point, I'm sure, but can we understand this person and see what's best for them and their soul and what their desire is to know the Lord? And let's say, why are we waiting on it? Let's go for it. So anyway, I think meeting the person is
that. You know me well enough to know I'm a kind of a stickler for rules, just because I'm fairly traditional, and I fear, like, the church ever, and I don't fear it necessarily because the gates of hell won't prevail against the church, but I get wearisome of times where negligence occurs, and we kind of get into a little bit more of an evangelical loosey-goosey interpretation of things. But I think the way you're describing it, we wouldn't fall in that, and you're more talking about, like, prayerful discernment of meeting somebody where they are and their
sure.
life and
Yeah, I
everything.
mean, just like not just some rando coming off the street and we start baptizing them because they showed up one day. But if I have had students who have been coming to my youth ministry for a year, and just because they didn't register before September doesn't mean that they weren't ready for it to be confirmed
That's
in the church.
that's not an official doctrine. That's a
Right.
rule for a rule.
Yeah, and so I'm like, so let's do this. Like
Yeah.
what does he need? He needs a godparent, a sponsor. Great. Yeah, okay, cool. So he needs to know what confirmation is. Well, we got that. He has to, like, desire to love the Lord. Yeah, he's got it. So let's do this. He desires the sacrament, and I think that's important. That we've talked about maybe is that the church was so focused on sacramentalizing people and not discipling them. I think if you disciple people, then they will have a desire for the sacraments and then actually request it, which is what the church asks you. Technically, that's why you write a letter to the bishop requesting the sacrament. That's why when you baptize a child and you go, you stand before the priest and they say, what do you desire from the church? You say baptism. We're actually making a request for the sacrament. And so once someone has been discipled and then they make a request for the sacrament, and there's been some time and formation and due diligence, I would say, but, like, why delay? Let's make this happen. So
you're speaking on we've been focused too much on sacramentalization and not discipleship.
mm-hmm.
Just pushback, not because I disagree, but just to clarify. In my personal life and in my encounters with Jesus, the times in which I feel as I've encountered Jesus the most is through the sacraments.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I feel like I've become the best disciple I can be.
Yeah.
That's when I'm living out the faith. So how do you kind of rationalize the idea that, for a lot of people, discipleship occurs through going through the sacraments?
Yeah, it does.
And
we are a sacramental people.
Yeah.
Because the sacraments are encountered with the person of Christ. They're obviously avenues of grace, mm-hmm. right, through the tangible that we experience, an outward sign of an inward reality. We are sacramental people. We experience Christ in baptism. Something really happens. We experience Him in Eucharist. We experience Him in confirmation. We experience Him in reconciliation. Experience Him in my marriage daily. Right? We experience and all those things. We are sacramental people. To be the focus on sacramentalization is not just getting people the sacraments. What I'm saying, what the argument was, that we have so focused on the rigidity of you have a 2-year program to come your first grade year and your second grade year, and your attendance has to be this, and you have to have a prayer memorized here, and then once you've checked all these boxes, you have to go to mass and have this mass card signed, and you have to do this, and this, and this, and this, or we don't give you your sacrament. Like it's
Yeah.
all the check boxes. The same thing
So,
for confirmation. You have to go all these check boxes, and that's the only focus of the catechesis,
yeah.
and not on the discipleship of the person of Jesus Christ, and therefore there becomes a deep desire for Him in the sacraments. We are a sacramental people. That's not what I'm saying. It's the focus of catechesis. It's like this in education, where they only teach for you to pass a standardized test and don't actually educate you. Same argument that I would make there is that we are teaching, our catechesis is solely focused on the requirements for a sacrament, and that's all parents see it as for too. That's why we have great attendance in first grade, second grade, and then you don't see them again until their 7th or 8th grade year, because they're only there for the sacrament.
Um, Man, and how blessed we are to have the sacraments as Catholics too.
We are sacramental people, and people will say, that you don't need the sacraments for salvation, but they don't. What they are failing to understand is that Jesus is the sacraments,
Mm-hmm.
and so you need Jesus for salvation.
So I reflect on kind of the early church and then how, especially like converts at the time.
Okay.
The conversion from the early church to like what it looks like now to be a convert into Catholicism looks drastically different. If I recall correctly, there was a period of time where it took nearly 3 years to fully integrate into the Catholic Church. So there's obviously been this living and breathing way that's ever changing of how we are integrating people into the church.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we're kind of moving in a direction where we are going to focus on discipleship, or do you think that perhaps right now we're going down a slippery slope where we're going to get into sacramentalization a little bit farther?
Well, and it kind of would depend on how early of the early church you talk about. We go into the Acts of the Apostles, and they go be baptized today. And so as the church of the institution has evolved over the millennia, different requirements have been made, and I would say at the outset that in good intention. Like, I don't think anything is done for poor intention, malintention. But early on, it's like today, be baptized and repent of your sin. And but the converts of the early church, as they chose Christ and they were being baptized and they were living as Christian, they take on the name Christian. It's a death sentence. In the early church, some people have made arguments that Constantine did not start the Catholic Church, for these people who say this, but what he did was not make it illegal in the Roman Empire. But what that did help was usher in and made it even easier just tons of folks to become Catholic without the catechesis. So there is that balance that we are looking for. So I think that
great for numbers coming in and saving souls and being part of the new arc of salvation, but when it's not necessarily a death sentence, it's hard to know, like, do you truly understand what you're taking on?
Yeah. So there's arguments that was maybe not the best thing for the church, and that we didn't do our due diligence there. So the church and its institution is listening, especially with Pope Leo. Like, he loves synods and loves listening sessions and wants to really hear from the people. And what's going on. And so I do think there is a great movement in the American church of a focus on and maybe it is the Protestant influence in our church, but that personal relationship with Jesus and how that it fits into the full picture of Catholicism and what we look for in the church. So I say that the Protestants and Catholics, we swim in the same pool, but there is a deeper depth that we swim down to sometimes, that we would agree on, 90 5+% of things, but we have a deeper depth of things. As you wade deeper into the waters, you can take a particular thing and we would go deeper in an explanation or of that or that teaching. And so I think there's a lot of commingling with our Protestant brothers and sisters that we can learn from in a great deal. And just continue to discern what it is the Lord's asking us to do, and hearing what our people are requesting, and saying, "Well, is this something that is good, true, beautiful that the church could respond to?" From great big things where they're talking about, and especially like South America church, of priests not baptizing families of divorced parents, to sillier things like the church office being open from 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, absolutely convenient to no one, as it opens up 30 minutes after they're supposed to be at work and closes 30 minutes before they get off work. Like, hey, maybe we have a better online system? These type of things that we can listen to our people and how we can best meet them where we're at. That was probably one of the bigger quotes in my life that helped me understand discipleship a bit better, as attributed to John Paul II, that to be an evangelist in this age is to know the modern man and to know Jesus Christ. And to be able to hear what that person is needing from the church, and then being able to give them Jesus.
Absolutely. So when you take that quote from JP2 and a little bit of what else you were talking about as well, I definitely think there's a lot we can learn from our Protestant brothers and sisters. There's so many of them are just on fire with the faith, and absolutely meeting people where they're at. I think, though, that there could be this danger, and I don't think you get into this danger, so I'm going to ask how you do it, is knowing modern man, meeting them where they're at, but ensuring that you don't skew the message so that it's so much easily digestible by the modern man. That's no longer the message that was intended.
Yeah.
A lot of times in the Protestant, well, not necessarily the liturgy. I wouldn't call it the liturgy, but you go to a Protestant worship service, but it's not the mass. It's not what we would call worship. It's not. There's no sacrifice there.
Right.
And if that were to occur during liturgy, those would be some liturgical abuses that are going on. And I think, especially speaking from a young person, there's this deep desire to return back to some traditional values, some traditional liturgy. So how do you meet modern man, meet them where they're at, do that heart encounter, but not fall for, the rock band, the water slides, the coffee, the loudspeakers, all that stuff.
Yeah. It's super difficult to evangelize someone who thinks they've already tried Christianity. It's like there was a book, the apostolic. Let's see, from Christendom to Apostolic Mission, basically looking how the church arc has gone from the apostolic age to Christendom, which is defining as church as the high point of culture, and now we're going back to an apostolic age, an apostolic mission. And he was saying it's much easier to convert or to bring Jesus to someone who's never really experienced it at all, versus going to someone who thinks they've already tried Christianity and then bringing them into the fold. It's like trying to convince your ex-wife to date you again. It's much easier to date somebody else. It's kind of the analogy somebody brought up, your ex-girlfriend. It's easier to go to date someone brand new instead of saying, "Oh, hey, you can definitely come date me now." And so that is a difficult thing to do, because the American Protestant Church has just gotten away from 1900 years of Christian life. Even 400 years of the Protestant Reformation, around the last 70 years, has really turned in what it's turned into. And someone who I've heard the story recently started going to a non-denominational church and really loved the music, and that was just really moving to them. And then they went to a secular rock concert, and they're like, "I think I just like live music."
Yeah.
And it wasn't that there's nothing wrong with the evangelical, the non-denominational church the way what they do. There's nothing wrong with their prayer. There's nothing wrong with their preaching. There's nothing wrong with music, but it's not liturgy.
Sorry.
And it, because we can definitely pray with music. We can definitely listen to people talk about the scriptures and give us the reflections on that. And so, even if that's something that you really enjoy, is the worship type music, like I would argue that if you were super rooted in your faith, and you attended liturgy and you knew what you were about and you want to participate in that like worship, it's not much different than going to like a Christian rock concert. So I don't think
I always
there's nothing
tell
wrong with that.
people, I'm like, you don't have to give those things up.
Yeah.
Listen to it
No.
in the car. Go to those concerts. Do all that. It doesn't belong in the liturgy. And then I typically get into a discussion of veneration versus worship, and perhaps that's kind of where like Protestants go next, where they're talking about, well, you worship all these things. Well, it's technically veneration, and that's why what you do is more so veneration than actual worship, because there's not that sacrifice.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and then they say, we sing a song, "Oh, come to the altar," but so often now in a Protestant church, there's no altar.
exactly.
And we did a really big. The Watermark in Dallas does a really beautiful thing where they invite. They don't carry a denomination. They invite all these Christian leaders to come to their church one week in April. They do like a leadership conference, and they
Yeah.
just say, "Hey, this is what we do. This is what we found that works, and we want to show it to you. And you take what you like and throw away what you don't, and come check it out." And we were in their little auditorium. I say little, 3,500 people in their auditorium, and they had this beautiful big LED screens and like a 10-piece worship band, and they're doing beautiful music, and they're wonderful musicians. But I had not felt so empty, that we're all standing and we're singing and praising to a 70-foot long stage with people on them. And and for myself, I just remember particularly thinking I've never longed for liturgy more.
Yeah.
And I just felt so empty with it.
Yeah.
And so to get back to kind of your point is, how do we bring somebody along who maybe is in that realm, or that's what they're being tempted with? I get a lot of my high school teenagers to say, I'm not really feeling the music, or I don't understand what this guy's preaching about, or these just a bunch of old people and we're stand, sit, kneel, and my friends go to this church and you can have coffee and hot dogs inside their church and listen to great music and stuff, and it's very appealing to them. And so this is a real concern
Yeah.
of being able to explain that to them. But again, I just don't know that you can explain and be sufficient, but just through the intellect.
So tell me what
Um,
you think about this, because this kind of been my approach when it comes to meeting the modern man, and of course I wouldn't really call what I do youth ministry, although we work with the same age sometimes. Mine's more of peer ministry, just because I just got out of college, so
sure.
we're my peers. But um, I've taken modern man and I've thrown them in old. I just throw them in fully. So I'm like, okay, modern man has noise around him, listens to music all the time. Um, I'm gonna go take them to adoration, complete silence. They're gonna for an hour, and they're gonna hate it, and they're gonna be like all the noises. But then they go out of there. The first 45 minutes it's terrible to them. The silence is so loud, and then like that last 15 minutes, they're like, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. Um, I do think like there's people that works for and people that doesn't work for. But what's your thought on taking that approach of like throwing modern man into this pit of tradition?
Yeah, so a couple of things with that. Number one, we also share physical fitness in common, and I've owned a
I'm going to
CrossFit
talk
gym.
about that.
Yeah, I owned a CrossFit gym for 8 years, and I lead people through fat loss stuff right now, and do CrossFit training. But in the same way that I probably wouldn't take someone unexercised through an hour long like workout with me, I want to walk you through it and say, let's have that first experience maybe be, hey, let's warm up that for me, but it might feel like a workout for you. And so walking them with that, and I guess also walking with modern man and the person of Jesus Christ, it's building relationship, building friendships, setting the example, modeling life, and to where they would look at you and say, this person has something that I desire, and then poses the question like, what is it that they have, and then you can say, let me show you. And then you begin slowly introducing. What that maybe looks like for me is not saying, "Hey, we have holy hour. I'm gonna bring you to it and sit you down for an hour, and you don't move." It might be like, "Hey, here's a book that I've been reading, and I really thought about you, and I want you. And here's let me buy you a copy." Or, I have a friend who I've been walking with a little while, and he was just sharing with me some difficult stuff that was happening in his life. And I was on a run about 2 3 months ago, and I was listening to Pandora Station, and some particular song came up. I think it was a Matt Maher song, and I went to the YouTube link, and in that song, I was like an idiot at 10 o'clock at night, putting my hands up in the air, praising and running like 4 miles and singing. And I went ahead and sent him that YouTube link and said, "Hey, man, listen to the song on a run. Made me think about you, and just want to know that I'm praying for you." He was like, "Oh man, thank you so much. You're a good friend, like whatever." And like these are little doors that we open, little moves, little stretches, little exercises, little experiences to the exercise of the faith that will stretch you a little bit, leave you open a little bit more to keep pondering and asking the question and just planting the seeds. There's that scripture in Romans, that we plant and we water, and the Lord does the growing.
Yeah.
And so we plant and we water. There's nothing wrong with the approach of saying, "Hey, come sit with me in adoration." But it could be like taking somebody off the couch and throwing them to a full-on like Murph workout and like 100 pull-ups, running mile and
You're
200
known to
miles.
do that too, so
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, and it could depend on the person. If you
Yeah.
know the person, like know the modern man, maybe that's the thing they need. They need a good kick in the butt,
Yeah.
and they need a wake up call, or they need the silence, or whatever. And that's what if you built the relationship and built the trust, and you know who they are, then that again looks for that avenue or that lever to say, now I kind of know what they need,
That's
and then you provide that for them.
that's so true. In reflecting back on those times, it was definitely after weeks, months, things like that, of trying to be that reflective light of Christ. Trying to be um, acting in the person of Christ, imitating Christ, not in the person of Christ, but imitating Christ.
Sure. Well, I mean, you are a little Christ, a Christian. So yeah, modeling him, but you're not in persona
Building,
Christi. I understand what you
yeah,
mean.
yeah, and then
Not
building that trust, and then I kind of go hardcore on, but definitely that what you're talking about first of being that reflective light. I always refer to like my Mary medallion. The cleaner this is, the more reflective this is, the more that it catches the attention of others. So the cleaner slate I am, the more reflective I am of the light of Christ.
mm.
So I love that you mentioned that. Now you dabbled into a topic that I wanted to talk about because I don't know many youth ministers, but you're definitely the most jacked one I know. although, although I think I'm giving you a run for your money now.
Yeah, man.
I
Yeah, you've leaned out. You quit playing baseball. You leaned out. I think you ran a half marathon faster than me. So
ran
let's
the full
figure that.
marathon. Don't take those other 13.1 out of me.
Oh, well, maybe you ran that faster than me too, probably. So, but
I'm
yeah,
trying for another one right now too. Uh, I've been enjoying it, and the reason why, and this wasn't always the purpose. I actually began running um, after baseball, not because of baseball, but after baseball. Wanted to stay fit and everything like that, but I began running for the wrong reasons. And it wasn't until a little bit after my running journey, when things really started getting hard in it, that I realized that the purpose that I was running for was completely off. So I had to re-anchor it, and now it's no matter how hard that workout is, no matter how hard the run is, there's an anchor there. There's a purpose there for that suffering. Um, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to see if your workouts have that. If you're working out for a spiritual reason, if you're working out simply for health reasons, a little bit of both. Kind of what working out means to you, and how you fit that in throughout your day.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely an anchor point of my day. I have just been on this fitness journey for not quite as long as the Jesus journey. Um, but I was always a really skinny kid. I had really fast metabolism. I think I graduated high school. I'm 6'2". I think I was 165 when I graduated high school. And about that time, I don't know if that was like 17, 18-year-old timing, and then I started eating the food, a lot of the food, and going to the gym. I got kind of relatively big really quick. And in like 6 months, people would come home from college after we just graduated high school, and they're thinking, this guy's been on steroids. 'Cause I went from like 165 to 205 in like 6 months. Um, and then I basically have more or less maintained that for like the last 20 years or so, a little up and down. But when my wife and I started dating, I got big. I think I got to like 238, and then as
Wow.
we got engaged, I was like, well, I can't be a fatso and get married, like so all the vanity comes in, and so I went back to and I lost some weight, and shortly after we got married, I was like, okay, well, what does taking care of the body look like? So I've always kind of had this idea that it's been preached to me that we are a body and soul composite.
Yeah.
So the things that are true for the body are true for the soul. The things that we take in, that we feed ourselves, like nutritionally, have an impact on your physical body, and the things that we consume also have an impact on our soul.
Mhm.
The exercises that we do with our body have an impact as well, but the spiritual exercises that we have an impact have a strengthening in our soul. And so that always really made a lot of sense to me. And so I've always seen things in that way. And so, yeah, shortly after we got married, I started training more regular, and I don't know, I work out 5, 6 days a week, and um, it wasn't until I think really a big transformative time was whenever I started doing more running. So there's some running in CrossFit, which has been my primary like exercise modality for many years. But in 2019 or so, I was reading a book about running or about mental toughness and getting through stuff. It was David Goggins' his first book, and I had asthma as a kid, and I just kept reflecting on all these experiences that I had trying to run, and this belief that I had in myself that I couldn't be a runner.
Mm.
I had experience as a fourth grader with bad asthma. Then I tried to do like football as seventh graders, and I would start off fine running with the wide receivers, special teams, and stuff. And then end up running with the linemen like really quickly. And I would try something again as in high school, and I kept reflecting on these experiences. At the same time, in ministry, we were going through healing ministry stuff where we were talking about the experiences you have as a child form these false truths in your head that you believe and operate out of that you've tied yourself to as a young person that affect you later on in your life, and how we have to break free of those things. And
Yeah.
so that parallel was happening to me at the same time as we're going through. I'm leading these things through prayer ministry and deliverance ministry with my teenagers. I'm going through this reading of this book, and how I've had these same beliefs that I cannot be a runner because whatever the reason was. And so I kind of made a deal with myself that I was going to run a half marathon in the spring and run a full marathon in the fall, from someone who had never ran. I ran 6 miles one time, and I've ran a couple of 5Ks. Outside of that, I've never done running. And so, but with that took a lot of a time of silence
Mhm.
and prayer.
Yeah.
And I've always experienced the Lord in the mundane, the ordinary, even
Do you also run without music?
a lot of
Or
times.
that's
So there's a lot of times I run or do outside physical, like mountain biking, even now, like without anything. Um, sometimes it's podcasts. Sometimes sometimes it is music, and it
Mhm.
just depends on what it is I'm listening to. But rarely is it secular music. So if it is music, it is a lot of times it is like worship music or just Christian music in general. Podcasts can vary for just whatever it might be, just to get the brain going. But it's the silence.
Yeah.
Silence, like you said earlier, silence is so loud,
Oh yeah.
and I think for me that's the running, and that slows me down, and I feel like when the Lord speaks, He speaks to me when I mow my yard and do yard work, because it's just me and nothing else here. and just I leave. It's like the door is open for him to come in. Like I'm not doing anything else. And I was like, he finally gets me to say, "Hey, why don't you stop thinking, stop trying to make things work, and I'm here." And it gets frustrating a little bit because sometimes I feel like I'm so flooded uh, that I want to write stuff down and I want to journal and remember this later. But yeah, in the deep of the depth of the suffering of difficult exercise really produces greatness on the other side.
Oh yeah.
I'll get in the middle of some, and then in some CrossFit workouts too. Like I'll get on some, especially like the Echo Bike or long single modality piece that I'm saying, okay, I'm just going to lock in, and right here, I'm just going to offer this particular suffering for this next 30 seconds, like it for whatever the particular intention might be. And because we do have that in our faith of redemptive suffering that we, even if it's like physical suffering that we are choosing, that's fine. We're choosing it, we're taking it on, and we're doing something about it. And then that just trains you for whenever you experience difficult things in life. So yeah, so I mean, just so the suffering in the we have this ability within our faith to unite our suffering to the Lord's and allow Him to do something with it.
Absolutely.
And I find that I just did a retreat for school teachers, and the retreat was basically on the Eucharistic formula of take, bless, break, and give. So obviously the Lord takes the bread, says the blessing, breaks it, gives it to his disciples, and there's many ways in which we see the Lord working with people in that same mode. Um, and that breaking is the one that we don't like
Mm.
because it's and he says it in scripture like the pruning. But we know from that great fruit will come from it. So you can think of the same thing in our muscles. Whenever we're working out, what's actually happening in the workout is we're tearing our muscles,
Yeah.
where they're breaking, and then they're being refed and then growing a little bit bigger the next day. And so this is not, again, what's true for the body is true for the soul. So it's not a foreign idea, but that breaking we're always so afraid of. But I did this exercise with them, with the teachers, and I kind of played four corners. One corner here was take, one was bless, one was break, one was give. I was thinking, and one of these four things that you've experienced in your life, which one did you feel like you experienced the greatest fruit from? And 90+% of them went to the breaking, which is the one that we're most afraid of, but it's where the most fruit can come from. And so I do the physical, man, because I just have to.
Yeah.
I have to, and whatever it might be. If it's mountain biking, it's running, it's CrossFit, it's powerlifting, I did jujitsu once. It's whatever it is. I think the physical teaches us something about the spiritual, and vice versa.
Absolutely. I think the biggest part there is no matter what you do, and no matter what fitness level you're at, it's the importance of the suffering element. Because I mean, it's why we fast too. It's
Yes,
teaching that you're not slave to your fleshly desires. You're not slave to this comfort. And again, yeah, I love the redemptive suffering part too.
and
Um,
discipline.
yeah, discipline and sticking with all the parts of the faith. I mean, Jesus did not offer or did not promise an easy life by following him. In fact, he kind of promised the exact opposite.
Pick up your cross and follow me.
And I love that. And with the suffering, for sure, the redemptive suffering, not being slave to the fleshly desires, and then also just uniting yourself with Christ through the suffering, because that's how He so loved you. This was through His suffering. So that's awesome. Now, I think there's an important part that you brought up there too, which is like you break down the muscles, you have to like refeed them, you have to rest them, things of that nature. What does rest look like, and how do you offer that up to God?
So there's a couple of thoughts there. So rest, not, and I'm not going to talk about like exercise here, right? Rest, not take a rest day. Talk about more the taking Sabbath. There's a
Yeah.
beautiful book I really enjoyed, and I may have recommended it to you already, but was The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Hmm.
And I was go, 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 go all the time. And my wife really likes to emphasize with our kids at this age to take to because we're forming our young kids to be
Yeah.
adult people, right? Is the importance of Sabbath. and what it is to take a rest and to really have a Sabbath. That's hard, because we feel like, especially in American culture, that we have to always produce. And if you don't produce 7 days a week, then you're behind. Well, Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby has showed us that, hey, that you can do it. And so really just trying to take that time. But it's a struggle for me because I do have a sense of this Americanized system of needing to produce and always be on and do it. But for me, I think it's important to know how to feed yourself. And I always tell people I'm the most extroverted introvert that there is. That I'm on stage, I'm on in front of people coaching them, and I'm in the public sphere. But to recharge, I need some alone time, and so this does kind of blend back to the exercise piece. For me to go on a 45-minute walk, for me to go on a mountain bike ride by myself, for me to go and just be in silence and try to encounter the Lord in the nature. There's something that's beautiful about getting up at 6 a.m. before anybody else is really moving around and go for a walk around the neighborhood and just see the sunrise. And then taking regular retreat, So even if you're not taking weekly Sabbath, which is something to really work on and see what that looks like for you, something like an annual retreat, and not one that you're putting on. So people will get caught up in the ministry trap that that they're always doing ministry. So I'm going on this retreat, but you're like putting it on for people. Are you retreating yourself? Or I'm chaperoning this retreat. I'm doing this retreat. I'm doing this conference. But when are you taking your time? And so my wife and I went on a marriage retreat a few months back, and it was just a very nice time to do that. With our life, with our busy kids and their schedules and our own schedules, I try to make it a point for us to do the 2-2-2 rule, which is where we try to have a date night every 2 weeks, or whether that even it happens to be, get the kids to bed and then we go on a walk around the neighborhood and just be with each other. And every 2 months, we try to have a night away. And then every 2 years take a trip, just the two of us. And that looks different for people for, whatever their current situation is, or they have help to watch their kids or not, or they have the financial resources to be able to do something. But everything is figure outable. It's been my phrase this summer, is everything is figure outable. And so you can figure that out. But that's something that we've done and worked on, that where we together take that break. Stop, pause in the middle of the week. I don't care what else is going on. Yes, we got busy schedules. We got this on this night, this on this night, this on this night. Let's find the time. Everything's figure outable. But you do have to rest and not have to do everything. The biggest thing from that book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and in this life transition, now I've been at St. Mary's 3 years. I was at a previous parish that for 10 years. But is that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So I get a lot of invitations to do particular things, or to be involved in this ministry or this retreat or this thing here. And just because I might have the particular skill set that this person is looking for doesn't mean I need to say yes all the time. Sometimes your no is very powerful for yourself, and to set your own limitations on it.
That's beautiful. The thing I really want to touch on there, you started talking about your wife being a husband, being a father. A few things. One, for anyone that happens to listen that's my age or in your position that's already married. One, how do you discern that call? How do you discern that vocation of marriage? And then two, what are some tips and advice that you might have for someone going down that path?
Yeah, so discerning marriage particularly, is really starts with discerning what is the Lord calling you to. That's what, vocation comes from vocare, the call. What is the Lord calling you to in your state of life? And so I know my wife Julie had spent some time whenever she was younger, discerning, is the Lord calling me to marriage? Is he calling me to religious life? Like, what does this look like? I spent 10 days with the friars in the Bronx, just with those guys and praying and seeing what that looks like. CFRs, yeah. a lot of priest friends that I, been around and different religious life experience, um, and to really just you can't you can't just start by saying I'm discerning like religious life, or I'm discerning married life, and until you have heard the Lord call you before, and heard His voice before in prayer. And so it doesn't just start with discerning your vocation. It starts with um, just being in relationship with Him and seeing how He's worked in your life before. And then you can confirm those things deeper as you go. When my wife and I were dating, we got married young. I was 2 weeks away from being 22 when we got married. So we just celebrated 15 years of marriage last May. And thank you. And we spent a lot of time praying before we even dated. We did a St. Joseph novena. We were going to mass together regular, and always keeping that in the forefront. We were even confronted once when we were helping out on retreat about the subject of dating and whether Catholics should date until they're maybe ready to jump in, or relatively close to jumping into marriage. And say, is that where we are? Are we within a year or two of getting married? And if not, should we break up? That was tough. And praying through that and spending some time. We spent a summer apart where I worked at a camp, and she was working in San Antonio, and we spent a summer apart, and we'd still write each other. And we really had like almost an old-fashioned relationship, because there's just that time where we didn't have iPhones, didn't exist. I mean, that's how old I am. This is particular like the 2007 time frame, as when we were dating and started dating, and so so it was just a different, just a whole different experience. And I think everything, if you take it into account to what like is the Lord calling, and let me listen. There's great debate of whether there is the one, or could there be many ones, or like, but like you're just with this one, and is the Lord calling? And where's the Lord putting you in your life, and putting that person in your life, and are you pursuing the same things overall, and having the same value, and can you trust each other and really love each other, which means to serve the other person. And so, as you were asking about like advice, we kind of was reflecting on this earlier, to serve, to know that two became one.
Yeah.
And so I don't particularly exist. She doesn't particularly exist. We exist in this unification of the sacrament, that two became one, and to really lean into that, and that there was in this marriage retreat particularly had me thinking about this, was they were asking us to pray about like where is Jesus in your life? If your life was like a circle, where does He fit? Is He kind of in the middle? Is He outside the circle? Is He like on the edge? And I was just like, man, that's so crazy to think about, that He is interwoven into everything that I do. So there's not like He's always in the right side of the upper left hand, whatever the circle. Like He's interwoven, and there's almost no separation. And in the same way that because I, in my baptism, I died, and in my walking with Him, I have become intertwined with Him. And in the same way, whenever I married my wife, like two became one. I can't do anything apart from her that doesn't affect her. I've made the joke, like, I really even can't go to Panda Express and buy lunch that doesn't have an impact on her, because that $10 affects us. Everything that we do affects each other. And so the fact that I can die more to myself for the betterment of her and for our kids, that is what it's all about. And so I don't do this perfectly by any stretch of the imagination. I am very much a broken human who gets angry at the kids and does this, and wishes things could be different and whatever else, man. But at the end of the day, if I look at the overall life situation, it's like, if I can choose to die to my own desires, even in the very small things, great fruit comes from that for the betterment of the us. So
That's
that's
awesome.
that's where we're at with that.
So I didn't know you spent time with the CFRs a little bit. That's
Yeah, and it was right before Julie and I started dating. It was during between a fall semester and a spring semester in college. A priest friend of mine flew a buddy of mine and I up to New York, and we spent 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, into December, first part of well, maybe it was just first part of January, maybe it was 2007, and just kind of lived with those guys for a couple of days. I was kind of friendly with some of them, knew some of them, and just from they were coming and helping out on retreats, and so we spent some time with them. It wasn't long. Um, it was beautiful. I even love taking retreat in the monastic life and with some friars. It's a beautiful life. Um, but
would you suggest for somebody listening that is discerning between married life or religious life, um, kind of going like on a date with a religious life order or something like that, or that's like
that's an
you date
interesting way to
somebody
put it.
before you marry them. So or at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
that's a common way of doing things.
Well, I have a former teen of mine who spent 4 years in seminary, and he recently discerned out. And one thing he was saying when he was talking to other young men was, the main point of the seminary is to continue to discern and to learn how to be a holy man. And
Mhm.
so I think there's great value in going and spending time and talking to priests. There's a great value in going and spending time with different religious orders and in the monastic life, going to the Abbey of Gethsemane, the Abbey of Clear Creek Monastery in Oklahoma, going and visit time with the friars. The guys who have different charisms as you are the same charisms as you, and spending time with that way of life. I think it's super valuable, but not necessarily to particularly discern that order, but just to have a deeper encounter with the Lord, and that's where you're going to find Him calling, as a deeper encounter with the Lord. Just as if, like, I don't know, like you wouldn't go to a young adult group just because you're on the prowl looking for a spouse, but you're going there to encounter the Lord in a new and different way. But maybe your spouse could be there, just like you would go to the monastery and encounter the Lord in a new and different way, and maybe your spouse or your vocation could be there. And so the goal is holiness. So
I like
the goal of your vocation is your holiness. The goal of your faith is your salvation. And so the goal of your vocation is a deeper holiness. And the Lord wants to call you to where you can experience the maximum amount of your personal holiness, whether that means you're married or you are flipping burgers at Burger King as a single, or if you are a religious priest or whatever, a religious brother even. So it's your holiness that is the goal.
that's amazing. I love the way you worded that. That shapes my way of thinking about this. So I'm going to write that down and reflect on that. And it's kind of pierced my heart in a way of like how prideful my discernment's been of like where do I see myself? Where do I see God putting
Sure.
me, and not which one's going to get me closer to Christ. Of course, at times I have that, but there's definitely been more times than there should be where that's not the focus.
Well, and I keep going back to our culture, that we are so career driven and
Yeah.
numbers driven that those things are markers of success in our culture, and that's just it's just not how God sees things all the time. I mean, He fed 5,000, He performed all these miracles, and at His death there were three at the foot of the cross, and one of them was His mom. So, like, the numbers aren't important to Him all the time, and the quote unquote success. I mean, sometimes you see these guys, these priests who try to give the best homily ever so they can like be on the same level as Father Mike Schmitz or something. It's like you're not Father Mike. You're Father so and so, or whatever, and like and you need to be who you're being called to be, because maybe you're not supposed to have the world's #1 podcast of religious, like, whatever, or but you're supposed to be to the soul in front of you. And so, yeah, it's easy to even get caught up in Catholic celebrity.
Yeah, yeah.
So because we forget the ultimate goal, which is holiness, and that's what Second Vatican Council actually calls us to. Is not like you know pool masses and leotards and things, but was the universal call to holiness. That the call to holiness is not just for the priests and the religious; it's for everybody, and we respond to our baptismal call to holiness.
Okay. So you kind of answered this question a little bit. Well, you need to encounter God first, but my question is along the lines of, how do you know you're hearing God's voice when He does speak to you?
If I give a better light here as I'm going out. How
Yeah.
do or maybe I turn on the actual lights in this room. Um, how do you actually know God's voice? Well, I guess the reality is you only way to do you don't. At the end of the day, you can only trust and step into faith. There's a beautiful prayer by Merton that says, basically, Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going, and I hope to do Your will. But the fact that I'd have to look it up. But the fact that I am stepping into Your will doesn't mean I'm actually doing so. But I still hope that brings You joy and pleasure. Thomas Merton, prayer on discernment, and it basically steps into I don't know where I'm going. And I can't know that I'm particularly following Your will, but my desire to do so, I hope is doing that is the goal. And so, but you can at least have particular confidence in that you have formed a prayer life. You have learned who God. You can see how God's worked in your life before, and you can say there's a book by Father Michael Scanlon. I think it's the 5 C's. I can never remember all 5 of them of discernment. But basically, does it conform to church teaching? Has it been consistent in the way that He's lived in your life before? Are other people confirming this in your life? And 2 other C's that I can't think of at the moment. But and these are just tools in which we can say this is God speaking. This is Him calling. This is how you can. Does it conform to the church teaching? Is it consistent with how He's worked in your life before? And can other people confirm this? And so those are ways that we cannot guarantee that, yeah, this is God for sure calling, but this is at least familiar enough to where how He's worked in the past. And so He's maybe doing it again. I'm going to turn on some light.
We were talking about hearing God's voice. You mentioned prayer routine and getting into a prayer life. What does your prayer life look like for you? You're busy. We talked about your physical fitness. You have 4 kids, wife, doing ministry. What does prayer life look like for you? Of course, it's integrated in your job, your work. But
Yeah, and tell you, whenever you are in professional ministry, it is the biggest trap. The biggest trap to say that, well, I'm doing God's work all the time, so I'm always talking to God or, whatever. And it is a big trap and a big reality people fall in. And, for so many years, the first, 13 years or so of my ministry, noon mass was the staple because both parishes that I had worked at, they had noon mass. So I'd roll into work, mid-morning and roll right into noon mass, eat, which would just be so perfect to kind of separate my day, roll into having lunch, and then finish out my day. And, and then bringing the Lord into that through there. Moving here to St. Mary's has been just a very big struggle for me personally, because Mass was so central to my daily prayer routine. And obviously we do have daily Mass here, but it's at 8 a.m. every day. And we homeschool our kids, and our day gets started around 7:45, 8 o'clock, and it's just not conducive for me. And so I'm always wrestling with that part, because that was so much part of my spirituality, what the Lord's calling me to next. And I think there's seasons of what prayer routine looks like. And I, with my wife, is so involved in moms group stuff that she hears this from a lot of moms and different things too, that the priests are so kind to the moms when they talk about like them struggling with their prayer life, because they're like, well, I've got these kids and they're at this activity and I have this whatever, and they kind of just are so kind to them, talking about how their life is a prayer in a lot of ways and sacrificial. And you know, I think about 1 Thessalonians 5:17. It says, "Pray without ceasing,"
Mm-hmm.
and how you make your life a prayer and what that looks like, but not being a cop out either. Because oh well, my whole life's a prayer. Um, it is a difficult thing to balance. I do try to daily start my workday with that prayer, where I just start in some silence to try to just calm my mind, invite the Lord into my day, my ministry, my full spectrum of life, and just start writing. So I start jotting down everything He's bringing to my mind, and that might be something I actually have to do for that day and actually work on. That might be part of myself personally, and some days it's just all work, and some days it's Him tugging my own heartstrings and things I need to do, and convictions. Um, and so trying to pray with the family too, and trying to continually set that example for them. Um, Sometimes it's as simple as just making sure we are not missing a prayer before meal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Those little prayers are the ones that seem to go first, and then everything just
yeah,
uh, falls by the wayside. I know in times in my life where I wasn't praying as much as I should have, or as much as I wanted. Um, I was like, man, I want to get back into prayer, but where's the time? And then I quickly realized, like, oh, I stopped saying my prayers before I went to bed. That was like one of the first things I did when I was young. I've always been fairly good at like praying before I eat and things of that nature, but like especially the ones before going to bed, those are like the simplest ones to do. And I always found in my life where if I wasn't praying as much as I should, those were the first ones that went away, and I was like, there's there's no reason for that. And I like how you mentioned praying without ceasing, especially not using it as a cop out, but I think it was Bishop Barron that I was listening to, and he's talking about like when mothers were like breastfeeding, like that's your holy hour. And then I was listening to
mm,
Father Mike's about, I think a personal friend of his that he was talking about regarding a really devout husband who wanted to continue his prayer life and marriage, but he'd like wake up early in the morning to go do his devotional. But as he's creaking down the hallway floor, a kid would wake up and be like, "Dad," and that was his prayer life. Then taking care of the kid, taking care of sick kids, and things of that nature.
yeah, yeah, and that's why I say it's seasons.
Yeah.
Um, and those seasons where you have deep, regular, consistent prayer carry you through. But we have to think about what prayer is, and it is does not help the relationship with God. It is the relationship with God, and
Mhm.
so continual that pursuit of staying connected to Him, and always pursuing that relationship and what that might look like. And whenever I was 20 and 21, that might look like a holy hour on a Friday and a Monday, and a bunch of different things. At 37 and 4 kids, that is different. That's a
Yeah.
prayer on the way to my office. That is trying to breathe and be patient with my 9-year-old. It is setting that example of the God who you've become in relationship with and you've come to know, and modeling that. It is always saying, I can't do this. It's not me doing it. God, I need you now. And letting that be the prayer. God, I need you now. Like, Holy Spirit, come. And like that has to be the prayer right then. And, but the church does provide us regular prayer with the liturgy of the hours.
Oh yeah.
And they make it so simple, being on the phone, iBreviary, download the app, as it has the morning prayer. It has, well, the invitatory, the office of readings, the morning prayer, the midday prayers, the evening prayer, the night prayer, um, and it's just the Psalms, and it's the prayer of the church, and it just makes it so scheduled for you to whenever you don't know what else to do, you can just fall back on the tradition of the church. The church provides, and it is beautiful to have the liturgy of the hours, step back from the Jewish tradition of praying 7 times a day or whatever, and we have the regular prayer time. Again, back to the monastic life, they center their day around the prayer, and so sometimes we say that excuse, well, I just don't have the time to pray. Well, these monks get up and they go and they pray at 4 a.m. and then they have breakfast and they come back and do morning prayer and have mass, and then they actually work. They have to work because they have to exist. They work all day and they come back and then they have noon prayer, they have lunch, and then they come back and they do their prayer again. They do it,
Yeah.
and we
I
get
get
to.
the excuse, but at the same time too, it's like God comes first, and you got to find those times to pray. There's so many times, especially in our modern world too, where there are those small opportunities where um, you can say a simple prayer. When you're driving to work, like you said, um, and when you wake up, when you go to bed, before meals. There's those tiny little things. One thing I've noticed specifically is as I've grown in my faith, I always thought my prayers would become more intense. That I would like find the right words. That I would know everything right to say and all that. And what I've noticed is it's the exact opposite. As I've grown in my faith, it's almost been like my prayers are a lot more relaxed. So I love how you mentioned that prayer is the connection with God.
Yeah.
Because now my prayers, they're not this tense subject where, oh, I have to say the right thing, I have to say it in this right order. It's just a conversation. And I think that's an important thing for the listeners to understand, because I'm sure you've seen this in youth ministry. The
I
one
saw
thing
it
I
today
saw,
myself. I don't
yeah,
remember what it was. I was walking to my car after I left my office, and I almost exhaled, and I said to myself from Scripture, "We don't know how to pray as we ought."
yeah,
And that's why we can just lean on the Spirit to intercede and to pray for and with us. We don't know how to pray as we ought, and we sometimes think these big long words are the way to do it. And we did a retreat this last weekend with a bunch of middle schoolers, and I was talking to the adults that were going to lead small group, and told them the beginning of every small group to start with a prayer, but don't make it sound intimidating. Don't make it feel like it has to be all these long words and these long structures of sentences, and say, what might be really good is saying, Lord, I thank you for bringing us here. Help these students. Help me. Amen. And just go for it. But just because we do sometimes make it feel like it has to be this daunting task, these long drawn out words and phrases, and
and God knows what's on our heart so much better than we know our own heart. And it's just that simple invocation, the intercession of a saint or asking God for help. That's just so powerful. And if, whether this is listened to by one person or 10 people or 100 people, um, and whether or not you show this to like maybe the youth that you administer to. So
yeah, and well,
one thing
and the silence is prayer.
silence is prayer.
And I think because we think that we have to talk for prayer,
Yeah,
and we don't.
yeah,
We have to. It's too cliche to even say, but we got one mouth and two ears. Listen as
mhm,
much as you talk, and if you can say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening," and then shut up and let
yeah.
him speak, he'll speak because you've asked him to. Like you've prayed for it. Like God, I want you to speak. If you're quiet long enough, he's going to talk.
I just want the listeners, especially, to know, like, because I saw it in spiritual advising people and things of that nature. It's just like people got so nervous about praying. They're like, I don't know how to pray. It's simple, that's easier said than done. I've been there too before. It's just talk. Talk to the guy that you know is there. If you're angry, be angry. Don't be angry all the time. It's not great advice. But if you're angry, let them know. Those are some of the purest forms of prayer. Is because you're not doubting he's listening at that point, because you're being mad, you're being angry. But
Yeah.
just talk and be silent. Offer things up, and it's that simple invocation. So I love that. Um, there's so much I can talk to you about. You're, as I said earlier, just a vessel of wisdom that I can continue talking about. But since we're on the topic of prayer, and because you got little ones around there, if you would want to close out and lead us in a prayer, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
Is there
Yeah.
anything else you'd like to say first or about
I
prayer?
mean, I appreciate you were having this desire to do this, I think this is you responding in prayer. That anytime we are taking a step in faith on what the Lord's asking us to do, again, we plant, we water, and He does the growth. And so, one thing about ministry life is that you are not promised to see the fruit of your labor. And that is the toughest part about ministry and discipleship and evangelization is there is no guarantee that you will see the fruit of your labor. But when the Lord does allow you to see it, man, is it beautiful. Mainly I see this in certain ways, like whenever my teenagers, like a few years later, are getting married and they're inviting you to their wedding at the church. And it's really special whenever two of your former teens marry each other. And that's super special. Or I've had the beautiful privilege of going to the ordination of one of my former teens at his mass where he was ordained priest, and that is something super beautiful. But just don't lose hope and lose heart in the efforts that you're putting out there, because just because you don't see the fruit doesn't mean it's not blooming, and because you're not responsible for when it grows. You plant and you water. I had a teenager who went off to college, and he was having this great debate all the time. He went to a secular school, and there was this Protestant who would always go back and forth with him all the time, and it got pretty serious according to him. That as it almost got heated quite a bit. And after they graduated, and a few years later, they ran into each other, and the guy who he was always having these debates with invited him to come to the Easter Vigil Mass because he was coming into the church. Like my teenager was having these apologetic debates with this guy, and it never got resolved. He never like intellectually convinced him to become Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
But 4 or 5 years later, he has this moment where this guy invites him to come to the Easter Vigil where he's coming into the church. And so like that's a blessing from the Lord to be able to see the fruit, but you're not guaranteed it. And so we just continue.
It's such a blessing when you do. I've recently had some of those blessings too, where I've seen some of that impact, and it's God's so powerful to especially use a sinner like me to make any small impact that I can. So I appreciate that message, and I think it's an important one for me to hear. I think it's an important one for a lot of these listeners to hear, because they probably are. If they're listening to this, they're on fire for the faith too, and want to go evangelize and help others. So
yeah, that's great. Good. Okay. Well, let's pray. Let's make room for the Spirit, because He is the animator. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, I'm so grateful that you allowed this time to take place, for this conversation, for this relationship, for all those who will hear this conversation, that it may be fruitful in their lives. I want to pray particularly for each person who does end up hearing this, that they may seek you in a deeper, more intimate way, and that you may be known. I ask for your Spirit to fall down on each one of us, to animate our lives, to allow us to see clearly, and to do the next thing that you are asking us to do, for us to be sensitive to your will, and to be bold in faith to step forward and to do what it is you've asked us to do. Pray for Tyler as he continues on his life and mission, and stepping in faith in what you've asked him to do, as he continues to discern more in who you're calling him to be in your kingdom. And I ask that you bless each one of us here and those listening in your most holy name, that is, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Stephen. This was amazing. I hope to do it again soon too. And
next time I'll have better lighting, I hope.
You're amazing. I will continue praying for you. I'll continue praying for the listeners as well. And I really appreciate all that you've done for me in the past. Appreciate this podcast, and you taking time out of your day to do that. I'm asking you to stay on the podcast just a little bit while I upload everything. But thank you very much.
Good, man. Thank you.